Okay, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming to our one-stop college admissions program. My name is Rebecca Jung, and I'm the Teen Services Librarian here at the Belvedere Tiburon Library. I did mention that the chat is on. If anyone is having technical problems or wants to send a message, you can communicate through the chat. But also, I did email out my phone number and my email address, and I'll try to keep an eye peeled for messages that might be coming in. I think we have a couple more people in the waiting room, so I will continue admitting people here. Hello, those who just popped in. We're just starting. Thank you for coming. I'm going to give a short introduction, and I do want to mention that we're recording this session, so if you have to step away early, we will send the recording out to everyone who is registered. Tonight we have two presenters on the topic of college admissions, and we are going to start with Michelle. Sorry, I just spaced out. Michelle Baird.
That's totally fine.
Michelle Baird from the Samara College Advising. With over a decade of experience in Bay Area independent schools, Michelle Baird, an educator and certified college counselor, has worked successfully with hundreds of high school students and parents to create clear pathways to college success and beyond, working closely with students and families to develop their unique abilities, interests, and goals in the college admissions process. From course selection to essay writing and list building, Michelle supports all areas of academic and personal development. So with that, I just want to introduce Michelle Baird, and I think we have everyone who is going to be joining, but I will keep my eyes peeled. Thank you so much.
Do you want to introduce Adam as well, or do you want to do that
I
between our
can do it now, and then
presentations?
we'll just flow into the second presentation. So our second speaker after Michelle will be Adam Piacente. With over 20 years of experience, Adam, founder of Marin SAT Prep, has personally helped over 1,000 high school students achieve their highest potential, overcome test anxiety, and learn great test-taking strategies, resulting in high scores, increased confidence, and greater opportunities in higher education. Adam helps each student choose the right test for their learning style and understand the complex scoring system and up-to-date changes implemented by the College Board. So we will start with Michelle, and then we will have Adam speak, and then we will have quite a bit of time for Q&A afterwards.
All right. Thank you so much, Rebecca. I'm going to go ahead and project my slides up. Can everyone see them okay? Is that looking good? All right, awesome. So, thank you so much for joining us today, and thank you for Rebecca for talking with us today and bringing us all in. So, I'm going to be talking a little bit more generally about the college process, and then Adam is going to be talking more specifically about standardized testing. So, first, I just wanted to start with a little bit of information about me. My name is Michelle Baird. And I got my certificate in college counseling several years ago, and I've been doing full-time college counseling since then. I did my graduate work at UC Berkeley at Cal and my undergraduate work at Middlebury College in Vermont. I spent well over a decade as a high school history and English teacher in independent schools in the Bay Area. So I have a lot of experience working with teenagers, understanding where they are, how they grow, how they develop, as well as a lot of experience working with them on writing and how that develops over time. So, all of that is definitely things that I bring into what I do and part of what's informing the way that I'm going to speak this evening. And in terms of college counseling, I provide support for all parts of the college counseling process from the very beginning all the way through the end. So that's just a little bit about me. And I think in terms of this presentation, what I'm going to do is start with a little bit of an introduction to when a college admissions officer actually sits down and reads a senior's admissions file, like what they're actually applying to for college, what they're looking at, and what they're thinking about what they're looking at. And then I'm going to back up once we sort of see a little bit about what the end goal is, and then talk about how we get there. So, when a college admissions officer sits down and actually looks at a senior's admissions file, like their application that they've submitted, they are looking at a wide variety of things. And I think it's good to just sort of know what it is that college admissions officers are looking for. The first thing that they're going to be looking at are student grades and GPA. So they're going to be looking at a transcript that's primarily focused on the courses and grades through a student's junior year in high school. That is primarily what college admissions officers are going to see in the fall and early winter as they're looking at seniors' applications. They're going to be looking at the rigor of the coursework that a student has taken. So it's not just what grades did you get, but also how did you challenge yourself. So if you had access to honors courses at your school, did you take honors classes? If you had access to AP classes, did you take AP classes? If you had access to IB classes, did you take IB classes and challenge yourself in that way? So it's not just about having really, really good grades. It's also about doing well in complicated or at least sort of rigorous curriculum. And colleges know that a high school student at a particular high school may not have had access to AP classes, right? So they won't expect to see that. Or they may know that an IB program was not held at a particular high school. They know what happens in a particular high school and they are going to look for what was available to the student at that high school and what did they take. Next up is test scores, and Adam will be talking about this a lot more. And so we've been seeing a shift to increasing weight placed on test scores over the last couple of years. And every year I have students who do not test, they do not take the SAT or the ACT, and they do not report those scores. And that is fine. There are a wide variety of schools that you can still apply to that don't look at testing, and that is a part of the college process that is accessible. Many of the competitive schools with very low admissions rates are moving towards requiring testing or strongly suggesting that you submit testing. So if you have a freshman, a sophomore, a junior who is sort of as looking at the college process, being aware of testing and its increasing importance in the process is important. That said, if you have a student, say, with a learning difference, it makes it really difficult to do standardized testing. That doesn't mean if they don't standardize tests, they can't go to college. There are options available. If your student is available and able to standardize tests, though, it's a good idea to do as a part of the college process. One of the other things that colleges are going to be looking for are extracurricular activities. So, outside of the high school classroom, what is a student up to? Performing arts athletics? Are they involved in community organizations? Are they involved in paid work? Colleges like to see that. Are they volunteering, right? Do they have experience and commitment to particular organizations and programs? Colleges are also looking for a compelling student narrative. So, looking at the personal essay, any supplemental essays for a particular school, looking at teacher recommendations, counselor recommendations, all these pieces together. Does a college have a strong sense of who the student is and what they want for themselves for the future? And does it all sort of come together in a way that makes sense and feels true to that student and their path? And then the final piece is fit with institutional priorities. And this is particularly your selective colleges with low admissions rates. They can admit any number of classes of seniors because they have so many applicants of very, very high quality. So, what they are looking for on a given year is a little hard to predict. So, who they ultimately end up accepting because they have many qualified candidates tends to be whatever their institutional needs may happen to be at that time period. So, most colleges review applications holistically, which means they are looking at all of these things together. It is not just GPA, it is not just rigor, it is not just test scores, right? It is all of these things in concert, looking at activities and awards and volunteering and student narrative. So, for most colleges, they are looking at students from a holistic perspective. All right. So now stepping back from like where you are looking at as a senior, right, in the fall of your senior year and sort of what you're submitting once you got all your applications ready is like, how do you actually get there, right? What is the college process and really what is the purpose of the college process? So as students are getting ready to actually submit those applications, they're doing a variety of things along the way. And it's not just about putting together the perfect application. This is really about growth and development over time. So, one of the purposes of the college process is for a student to develop a sense of themselves and what they want for their future, right? So, it's not just like, oh, okay, my friend's applying to this school, so I'm going to apply to that college as well, and maybe we'll both get in and go. If that happens, that's great, but a student needs to have a better sense of who they are, what they want to do with their future, and sort of what that vision looks like for themselves. It can include some overlap with their friends, but ideally it should be their own vision of themselves and their future. A student is also going to develop an understanding of their best fit colleges academically, socially, and financially. So, for a particular student, what is the best academic environment for them? Where are they going to be most supported? Where are they going to be most challenged? Where are they going to learn the best? What are those schools that are going to be the best academic fit? Socially, where are they going to be connected? Where are they going to thrive? Where are they going to have opportunities? And financially, for the student and their family, what is the best fit school for them to make sure that that is a holistic piece of the puzzle? Students will also develop the tools, skills, and resources they need to be successful in college. The end goal of this is for students to go off and be successful in college. And the college process really helps them develop all those pieces and all those bits of maturity and all those bits of independence that they're going to need to be able to be successful on their own. Their families don't actually go to school with them. They're going to support them throughout the process, but then we want the students to be successful once they're in college. And then the final part of the purpose of the college process is really making sure that the family receives timely information at the right times and support as they're navigating this very large transition that happens from high school to college. That including the family in this process is an important piece. Now, if we're looking at like what are the steps? So, how are you actually going to do this and what is it going to look like? There are sort of four distinct phases of the college process. And really, the beginning of the process is thinking about academic advising and activity development. So, what courses is a student taking? What courses are they taking at which years? Are they in the right language class, the right math class? Are they taking electives that they care about? And then are they exploring and involved in activities that they really love? And if they're finding things that they don't like, how are they shifting and exploring some new opportunities to see what it is that they actually might like to pursue in the future? So really getting solid understanding of the academics and the academic pathway, as well as activities to support that, is the first piece of that college process. The second part, and this is one of the really important parts because it becomes important later on in the process, is college research and application list development. And so this is when students really learn about schools and learn about, okay, not just what I see on the surface or like what I've heard from my friend or my neighbor, or maybe my aunt or my uncle or another family member, but like what actually is going on in my particular area of academics, like what do the majors look like? What are the courses like? What's actually happening on campus? What sort of social activities are available? So, really digging in to get a very good sense of each college and then developing an application list that is well tailored to the student so they have best fit schools for them, and they also have best fit schools across a wide variety of acceptance rates. You want some that are going to be reaches that are difficult to get into. You want a lot that they have a good 50-50 chance of getting into. And then you want several that are likelies where they have generous admissions rates where we know the student will be successful and thrive. So you want to have balance all the way across that acceptance list. Then you actually get into the third step, which is personal essay and application writing, writing that personal essay for college, figuring out what you're going to talk about, what you're going to say about yourself, working on tailoring all the different pieces of the applications. Submitting them is the last piece. So, like getting them in on time with all the pieces waiting, returning in the fall and sort of like early winter of your senior year, returning to the rest of your activities, sleeping a little bit more, and then receiving those offers and then making decisions about where to actually go is an important piece of the process. In a successful college process, there will be students with many options of places where they've been accepted that they can really think about, okay, where exactly is the best place for me due to a variety of different factors. So those are sort of the four phases of the college process that we're going through. Now, when you actually look at how this breaks down by grade level, it's going to look a little bit like this. So, starting in ninth grade, so freshman year, really thinking about, okay, how am I transitioning to high school? Like, how am I settling in? How am I finding my friend groups? How am I finding my activities? And then thinking about my academic advising, like what sort of math classes am I taking? What sort of electives? Really thinking about, okay, do I want to do this performing arts? Do I want to be involved in the theater? Do I want to try crew? Do I want to do a whole variety of different things? Do I care a lot about volunteering and really want to get involved in that? So, sort of developing that piece and then really using freshman year to explore new opportunities, try new things, step outside yourself. The world is a large place with a lot of opportunities, and it's important to explore those. 10th grade or sophomore year, we're continuing to work on the academic advising. There's often more options in terms of courses that students can take. They can get more involved in activities. They can develop the activities that they're doing. They may decide to switch activities and try something different. This is also the place where interest surveys and exploration can come into effect. So really thinking about like, hey, what kind of subjects am I interested in study? Let me like take a few surveys and figure out what that is. Or, I wonder about like if I major in this particular thing or if I pursue this, what would I do for a career and what would that be like? Like a day in the life of whatever. Is that something that I want to do? So getting a chance to explore and deepen a little bit. And then that summer after 10th grade year, really looking at, okay, what am I going to do? Like, am I going to try and volunteer? Am I going to try and get a job? Am I going to take a course? And am I going to, travel? Like, what is it that I want to start building in terms of my summer activities? Junior year or 11th grade is one of the most significant years. And I think everybody has heard this. The academics get intense. Everything is sort of is very much focused on getting ready for that college application cycle. And so the 11th grade year is important. Students want to be healthy, they want to be happy, they want to be challenging themselves and focusing on their academics and making sure that they're doing as much as they can to really develop themselves in their 11th grade year. This is a time where it's a really good idea to start attending college representative visits. So, high schools will have college representatives coming from colleges and universities all around the country, as well as often from Canada and sometimes Europe and the UK. Any colleges that a student doesn't know about or might be interested in as a junior, they should start going and listening just because it's a great way to learn a lot about schools that they may never have heard of before. It's also a good time during 11th grade to go on tours. Now, there are virtual tours available of every college and university out there. A lot of my students take a lot of virtual tours, and it's really helpful to learn more about colleges in depth. And anytime that a student has an opportunity to actually visit a school in person, they should go. So if there's a parent or an adult in their life who is traveling and can take an 11th grader along, and there happens to be a college or university nearby, go ahead and take them and set up a tour and actually go look at the school. In person can be really, really helpful. If there's a family wedding and you can take an extra day on the end and visit a school or two that's nearby, that is an excellent opportunity. Students and teenagers learn a lot from actually being on site. They can figure a lot more out for themselves when they're actually there. Now, if traveling is a little bit outside of where you're at or have a busy schedule, that's totally okay. Visit some local schools, visit UC Davis, visit UC Berkeley, like actually get on some really big UC campuses and see how the student feels about that. They may love it and they may be like, whoa, this is way too big, which is an important piece of the college sort of process. University of Santa Clara University is local and easy to get to. That's a smaller Catholic type of university. There's a lot of options that you can just drive without too much difficulty and get a chance to find out and see different types of schools. College list building is where that research and starting to figure out which schools you may actually want to apply to and starting to pull that together. All of that really starts in earnest in 11th grade, oftentimes in the spring. And then in 12th grade, that's when we're off to the races. Everything is happening. So essays are getting written over the summer. Application development and submission is happening in the fall and early winter. So it is a busy, busy time for seniors. There's a lot of excitement, a lot to do. But as long as they have been working consistently through a college process, it is quite manageable to get through the fall of senior year. Waiting until fall of senior year to try and squish all of this in can sometimes be a bit much and a little bit stressful. So it's good to start early and then figure out how students can pace themselves. Students will apply and then they receive offers. Often they will receive offers of admissions from schools. They'll say, hey, you've been accepted, and then financial aid awards will follow. Sometimes that's right at the same time, often it lags a little bit, but just know that those two things will be sort of happening at the same time. And then a student sits down with their family and actually reviews everything and talks about what's best. And then May 1st is the magic deadline. So every single senior needs to make a decision with the college process of, okay, what school have I chosen? What school am I going to matriculate at that I'm actually going to go to? And I am going to put down my housing deposit by May 1st, which is committing to that particular school in order to go to. So that is sort of the basic timeline, a very sort of quick overview about what is it that is being submitted? What is the purpose of the process? How do the stages of the process actually develop? And then sort of broken down by grade. When you spread this out over 4 years, what does it actually look like? So I'm going to sort of end here and turn it over to Adam, but I would say students and parents have a lot of questions about the process, which is very, very normal, and I am here to help answer all of those questions. So here's my email. You're always welcome to reach out, shoot me an email, and ask questions, and I am happy to send you an answer. All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and then let Adam go ahead and do his presentation.
Thanks, Michelle. Let me get mine up. Okay. Can we see that? We're good?
We can. Yeah,
Okay.
perfect. There you go.
All right, cool. My name's Adam Piacente. Hi, everybody. Thank you, Michelle. It was great. Really quick about me. I'm a retired law attorney and law professor. I wrote a couple of books in the textbooks in the 90s in online legal research. But for the last 20 years, I started Marin SAT prep in 2006, and for the last 20 years, we've been me and other tutors. Now it's just me, but originally I had a number of other tutors working for me. We've helped thousands of students. I personally tutored over 1,000 different individual testers, and throughout the years, Marin SAT prep has also helped local high schools and nonprofits. Belvedere and Tiburon Library, we've been doing a program like this since 2012, so it's been a while. Okay, so let's just get into this really. I have a bunch of things I want to cover, so I'm going to move a little quickly. I apologize for that. But how important are these tests? 95% of admissions tests are required or optional at four-year nonprofit colleges. The 5% that aren't required or optional, a number of those are the UCs and CSUs, but we will talk about that because that may be changing. 83% of college say test scores are of considerable or moderate importance. Michelle touched on this before, but it's really, it's the old chestnut is three legs of the stool. Grades in courses, but especially grades in higher courses is considered important. But right there with it is admission test scores, and then all the other extracurriculars and everything is the other sort of leg of the stool. Admission test scores being one of those. Um, Basically, for schools that are, that look at test scores, raising your test score is the easiest, most effective way to improve your chances of admission because everybody looks at them. But if you think about it this way, if you spend, say, a couple of months trying to get your SAT score or ACT score up from a certain, I don't know, maybe 75th percentile to 90th, 90 percentile, you're really jumping a, a, a big, making a big jump in a little amount of time. Whereas if you really work hard on one semester and get your grades up for that one semester, it's still only an eighth of your GPA. So in order to really raise your chances in the least amount of time, the most effective way to do it is by studying for the SAT or ACT. Also, SAT and ACT are also typically schools, if you're in the top 25% of your incoming class in your SAT or ACT scores, that's typically the cutoff for non-need financial aid. So a lot of times you can get some money back. Okay, let's talk about required versus optional because there's a lot of questions about what goes on here. So for test required schools, all students must submit either ACT or SAT scores when applying. Now, it's not like the old days when does this school take the ACT? Does this school take the SAT? Nowadays, all the schools take both. So there's no real difference, and you can submit either one for consideration. Test optional. Students may submit scores when applying for admission, but be careful here. This is not really what it sounds like. It sounds like, oh, the schools don't care if I submit or not. They're just going to look at it as another sort of feature of my application. And yes, it is, as Michelle said, it's very holistic, but there is a real, especially lately, as schools who have gone test optional and even UCs who are not requiring the test currently are realizing the importance of that now that they're seeing sort of the effects of that. And we're going to talk about this a little bit in a minute. Are they really optional? I like to say they're really optional for the schools, but not for the students. 80% of applicants to test optional schools submit ACT or SAT scores, which means that, if you're not submitting scores and you're in the range for that school, you're really doing yourself a disservice because you're really, it's so competitive and 80% of applicants are submitting it and you're not. You're already putting yourself at a disadvantage. This shows up. This is a rate from 21 in 2022, and it's actually the numbers are actually more so now. Basically, if you look at the long story short on this is that if you students who submit scores are 2 to 3 times more likely to get in than students who do not submit scores to test optional schools. I looked up Yale, which is now going actually back to test required, I think this year or next year. Their test optional numbers were they let in 2% of students who didn't submit test scores and 6% of students who did submit. So it's like a 3-to-1 ratio. So you really are improving your odds, even at test optional school, to do that. One last thing about test optional, and you may hear it from certain college counselors. I don't think you'll hear it from Michelle, but there are still some college counselors who are using this old strategy that I never really understood, but I really want to touch on it very briefly because if you hear this, it's probably bad advice. And let's talk about what this means. So before test optional, basically, it was just a regular scale on this. Now, this isn't any specific school. This is just basically just a generic school. Let's say before test optional, their scores from the bottom to the top 50% are 1325 to 1475. That's their range. What they do on test optional is they basically just cut off the bottom quarter or third of the students and use those seats to to admit students who are not in the regular pool. So if they're economically disadvantaged, if their grandpa gave $50 million to the school once upon a time and they're a legacy, or if they're a good athlete or whatever for a reason and they don't have the numbers, they're more willing to let them in. But if you're not one of these special students, that really doesn't apply to you. Now, the reason I'm hitting this is because when you have, like, you'll hear college counselors tell you that if for test optional schools, if you're not in the top 50% of your uh, of that average, then you shouldn't submit scores. But for me, that absolutely makes no sense. If you're in the bottom 50%, you're still at a better rate than they're going to still look at your application better than they will for anybody who doesn't submit a score. If you're in the bottom 50% and you don't submit a score, they're going to assume you aren't even in that range at all. So for me, it never made any sense why college counselors, this is changing. I know a lot of counselors now don't tell you that anymore. But if you do get somebody who says that, just remember that being in the bottom 50% is still, better than not submitting a score at all. And so it's just something to be aware of. And as Michelle was saying, there is a real push now coming that the test optional schools are going back to test required. I think all of the Ivies are going to be test required by maybe next year. They think there's 2 left. A lot of the other schools like Cal Poly and Stanford and a bunch of the highly selective schools have already gone back, and it's really kind of trickling down the system right now because what they're finding is that the students that they're admitting, they don't have enough data on the students to really make educated decisions on whether or not the student can do the work. And so they're getting a lot more dropouts and a lot of things that are happening because they're not using the numbers. So a lot of schools are saying enough of this, we're going back to using the numbers. With that said, that kind of begs the question about the UCs. Now, the UCs and the CSUs do not currently, they got rid of the test requirement in 2020 during COVID, and now they're getting significant academic and public pressure to reinstate testing. So the UC San Diego last spring, I want to say, came out with a long report, which is basically a big white flag saying we really need standardized testing, basically because a lot of the students they're admitting on the math side for math and science courses just can't do the work and don't have the background to do it. Even though they may have been passing classes in their high school, they still haven't been able to do the work. And so there's a real push now. There's actually some the California state legislature is getting involved. There's a number of legislators talking about this, and there's a real push to get this back. It's real, like, we can't wait. We need to get it back. There was a sort of a calendar that sort of originally said maybe 2027, but realistically speaking, you'd be asking seniors to take the test and everything. So, but my guess, and this is just my own official opinion, not an official opinion, my own opinion on this, is that we're probably seeing the class of 2028 having, at least if they're not going to require the test, at least they're going to allow students to submit the tests during that time. So if you're a junior right now, and you're thinking, well, I want to go to UC, so I don't really have to take the test, that may not be the case. So just to give people a heads up, just to be aware that they may be reinstituting this sooner than you think, because there really is a lot of pressure right now to do it. Okay, so my recommendation here, take the test, expands college choices, improves your admission chances, and increases your scholarship opportunities. Now, let's talk about comparing the tests. ACT is 4 subjects. The scoring goes to 0.36 points apiece for each of 4 subjects. For an average score, which is they average those 36 together for what they call your composite score, which is your main ACT score. I will point out that science is optional on this test, but I always recommend that students take the science course or take the science subject as well. Some students are like, Well, I really don't really do well in science. You don't really have to know much science at all. It's just how you read charts and graphs. But oftentimes, that math and science score together is important, and it's becoming especially important now as the schools are again seeing that their math scores aren't doing well. And that science score is often a better score on the ACT than the math score. So if you want to improve your STEM score, if you don't feel like your math score is great, a lot of times you can bring up that STEM score by having a decent science score. But either way, because STEM is so important, that is getting more important, you really want to take that science portion. On the ASAT, it's 200 to 800 points a piece for both the verbal and math subjects. There's two subjects. They add those two scores together for a total of 1,600 points is the best score you can get on the SAT. People ask what's the difference is basically broad picture. ACT is more of a sprint. SAT is more of an obstacle course. Their ACT, there are more questions and less time, or more questions and less time per question. But they're easier. There's not as many tricks. There's not as many sort of IQ testing sort of features on it. SAT is much more of an obstacle course. It's a more leisurely test. You don't have to take as much time, but there are more tricks that you need to know. So if you really just like to work quickly, a lot of times the ACT is better for you. If you don't mind the puzzles, if you don't mind, or if you'd like to be a little more methodical and take your time, the ACT is just too fast. SAT may be the right test for you. ACT comes in digital format or paper. I kind of like the paper. I'm kind of old school that way, especially on the reading sets, because it's really easy to mark up the reading on the paper as it's not as great online. Science optional, as we talked about, I recommend you take that. There is also an essay on the ACT, and this was something that was discontinued on the SAT a few years ago, but it's still on the ACT. I don't recommend it. What it is it's not your college application essay. It's just this separate essay that students write after the test. And it was really designed when it first was introduced in 2015 to see if the student didn't write their college application. So they had sort of a raw writing sample. But none of the schools really used it, and they graded it, but it didn't really count towards your score. And so really it's not important you take it. The schools don't care for it, don't care about it. But the science I would recommend. On the SAT, they went to a digital format in 2022, and they made it what's known as adaptive. So you can't do it on paper. You can't do the SAT on paper anymore. And they made it adaptive. What that means is that they give you two modules of verbal, two modules of math. The first module for each one is sort of a broad range of questions, easy, medium, and hard. Depending on how well you do on that module, you either get the harder module as the second module or the easier module. If you get the easier module, basically the highest score you can get is about a 600. If you get in the harder module, the least score you can get is about a 580, 590. So what you want to do, so the strategy on that is you want to make sure that you can get into that harder module, the second one, so you're locking in that score. And then depending on how well you do, you just kind of ratchet up your number on that. Okay, so how do I decide ACT, SAT? A lot of times, if you've got some time and you're willing to really do your due diligence on this, you take two official practice tests. Now, I always say take official practice tests, Kaplan, Princeton Review, things like that. The College Board and the ACT both have official books and official tests that you can take. Do those, because those are the real things. And also the practice tests that come out, a lot of times they'll have questions that they're thinking about doing again, or their thing they want to put in. So you're really kind of getting a feel for what's going to be on the actual test. And then once you get those two scores, then you use what's known as a concordance table. I'm giving you this is the basic one here, sort of to compare what your numbers are vis-a-vis each test, so you know which one you're kind of doing better than. Most students end up doing a little bit better on the AC to start, but that's because there's a few more like technical things you got to know about the SAT. But if you really have a student, so it's kind of like, what do you feel? What's your feeling on the test? How do you feel? Did you like the speed? Was it okay? Do you worry about the tricks on the SAT? But if there is a significant difference, by significance, I mean maybe two ACT points, like 29 versus 31, or 24 versus 26 or 27. Like say 25 on the ACT versus a 1280 or 1310 on the SAT. You want to go with the one that you're doing a little better than on typically. So it's a matter of just taking the both tests and then using the concordance tables to compare. Okay, so I always tell students that they need to take this test at least twice. Now, this is from the College Board 2018, 63% of test takers improve their score by taking at least one more time. I think it's higher than that even. I very rarely do I have students who take the test twice end up using their first test numbers. Usually it doesn't happen. They almost always improve the second time they take the test. And what I like to do, and we'll see the calendar in a minute, but what I like to do is have my students take take the test twice in junior year, and then go away over the summer. And then if you really want to optimize your scores, take it senior year a third time. Seniors who have taken the test junior year and do those fall tests, we're going to see that in a minute, always get their best numbers. That is when you really want to optimize. If you really want to get the best numbers you can, twice in junior year, once in senior year. Okay, so let's look at the calendar here. So I've starred the ones that are kind of recommended for juniors and seniors. I really like, again, because of the way the calendar works and because of the school year, there really are test dates that where the performance is better on one than the other. December, I like my students to get in first semester, take the December tests. So you get that first one out of the way, you get it under your belt. So when you're taking the one that everybody takes, which is either a lot of times for the March SAT, which is one all the college counselors tell them to take it and everything, you're getting in there the second time rather than the first. So you really feel more confident. You really feel like you have a leg up. And that's true also for the early February test, although a lot of students do take that mid-April test. The later you go in the semester, you just see the performance drop. The May and April tests are okay. Sometimes you get some good performers out of that one, but those summer tests, early June for both the ACT and SAT, mid-July on the ACT, and this late August test they're just often not good performers. The early June ones are probably the worst ones of the year. Students are just so burnt out they've just been through finals or APs and everything else. The junior year is the hardest academic year, and they just have a real trouble with that June test. If you don't do well in June, you'll do better in the fall. Don't get discouraged about the June test. It's not your fault. The performance on those are bad. And then when you're in summer mode, mid-July, late August, also not great. But when you hit those senior tests, mid-September tests for the ACT, mid-September, early October for the SAT, those are by far seniors taking those tests do better than any other students. That's when you want to take them. So try to front load the junior test for December and February or March for the SAT, and then avoid the summer testing and come back in the fall, in this early fall, once students are back in school. Okay, when you start prepping, people ask me when. The earliest, I get freshmen and some sophomores they want to start, and for some reasons they'll do that if you're, but really the earliest, you haven't had the math yet, and you haven't really had the reading either. Earliest you want to start is beginning junior year or summer going into junior year, especially if you're looking for National Merit Scholar, which is a PSAT. If you think you're going to do really well early on. If you're struggling, you're busy, you can get a lot of the basics out of the way in the summer. The best time is right now, starting early junior year. Again, working towards what I like my students to do is working towards that December test right now. Toughest late junior year, as we talked about, the school year is just really works against you. You're really going against the headwinds if you get started in say after March. Latest early senior year, a lot of students say, oh, well, I didn't do it junior, so I can't do it. That's not true. Seniors actually do very well who start prepping. And the other thing about it is, if you're doing September, October tests, those are you submit those for early action, so those still count. But if you're not going early decision somewhere, or early action, or whatever they call it, you can do the November, even the December tests, and they'll still forward on your scores. So just because your application say have to be in by November 1st, you can still do the November and December tests, and those scores will still count because they really aren't making decisions till the first year anyway. Okay, test registration, sign up early. Marin is underserved, has always been underserved for standardized tests for college admissions. They have very limited available seating, book well ahead. Some students book 6 to 9 months ahead. If a date is booked out, they'll keep checking back for cancellation, especially true on the ACT. You can often find people canceling last minute and you can slip in. Also take advantage of school sponsored tests. A lot more schools now are doing tests in their school. So make sure you take advantage of that if you can. It's an easy way to get in and make sure you're going to get a good spot. Also at a place where you feel comfortable, which again is part of the performance aspect of that. ACT tip, when you're signing up, if you sign up for the ACT and you're taking the October, December, April, or June test, also sign up for the ACT My Answer Key, MAK. They will actually give you the test that you took and show you your answers. And if you're doing any kind of prep work, this is gold stuff, because then we can see exactly what the questions are you missed, what we need to work on. It's really, really helpful. Okay, one caveat, when you're signing up for the test, do not submit score reports. They always want to try to sell you more score reports. You get a few free ones and then for the registration and so on. Don't submit anything. People say, oh, I'm going to submit to Harvard. I'm going to submit to Yale. You don't know what you've gotten yet. And you don't necessarily want to show them those scores. So, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what you really want to do is wait till all the testing is done. You're happy with your numbers. You know what you've got. Then you submit the ones you want to submit, but don't submit scores during registration. Okay, people want to talk about, well, okay, what do these scores mean? It was 835. What is it? It really is about the percentiles. And basically, they work in tiers. So if you're at 500 on the SAT or about a 20 on the ACT, that's sort of minimal college readiness. That's to get into any school, really. At 600 or about 24, 25 on the ACT, then that is sort of where the selective schools start. And then it's 700 on the SAT per subject, 700 for math and verbal, or 30 for the ACT. That's when the highly selective schools start. I was talking to a college counselor. She said for a highly selective school, you got to think about 1450 is really a target number for that. And so what we try to do when we're doing prep is, a lot of times, you hear these, oh, we'll get you a perfect score. That's not going to happen. As any preps courses that tell you that, they're blowing smoke. What we really try to do is optimize your score. A typical score gets you into the next level. So if you're in about 550, why don't I try to get you about to 650 for each of your subjects? Bounce you into that next level. And if you notice, between 500 and 600 is, on the SAT percentiles, is 41 to 70, 33 percentiles. If you get 200-point advantage, you've bounced, more than 50 percentiles. So again, this is really a way to be very efficient. It's a really efficient way to improve your chances to get in. Okay, sending your scores, the vast majority of colleges will allow you to do what's known as SuperScore. SuperScore is where, let's say you take the test the first time and you get I'm making up these numbers, you get a 700 on the verbal, you get a 600 on the math. And then the next time you get a 700 math and the 600 in the verbal. Well, you've gotten 1,300 both times, but they will take the best scores from each test sitting. So you submit both of those scores, and your super score, which is really the number they're looking at, is a 1,400. And that's what you want to do. The vast majority of colleges will use super score. There's still a few colleges, and you always want to check to make sure what specifically they're looking at. A few colleges still want all sittings, but the vast majority, super score is your number. Thank you very much. I appreciate the time, and I guess Michelle and I will take some questions.
Thank you, Adam and Michelle. I just posted a chat. Anyone that wants to post to the chat board, I can read those questions aloud. Or if you raise your hand, we can then unmute you and you can ask a question. You can always email any of us. So you can email me at the library afterwards if you think of a question or a topic that didn't come up. But if you have a burning question right now, you're welcome to post it or raise your hand. And we'll wait a few minutes and see if anyone has questions. Or Adam and Michelle, if you think of anything that people always ask, you're welcome to jump in too.
Oh, thank you, Therese.
Okay,
Well,
if we don't have any questions, we'll wrap it up. And Michelle?
yeah, I was just going to say while we're waiting to see if I know we just delivered a whole lot of content really quickly, so people may be processing all of that. I just brought a couple of resources with me. I know I got asked the last time that we did this presentation, what are good resources to look at? And so I'll just go ahead and share them while people are sort of thinking about their questions. So the first is the FIS Guide to Colleges 2027. This is a really, it looks very thick and intimidating, but it is a really helpful overview of a whole bunch of different schools that pulls a lot of information together and really talks about student experience. So if you're looking for good places to start in terms of looking at schools and trying to figure out what your student might be interested in, this is usually a really good one. This is a bit of an old school book, but it's now in its 15th edition. It's called College Match, and it is by Stephen Antonoff. This is a wonderful resource for students and parents. It really walks people through the whole college process and has helpful worksheets. I've used a lot of this stuff in my practice. And then I know we have more questions coming, so this is good. I'm glad I'm sharing my books. If you're looking for sort of like modern books, this is Dream School. This is by Jeffrey Salingo, who has done a lot of different writing. This is his most recent book that's really good. He's also done Who Gets In and Why, which I found is really helpful in terms of understanding the admissions process at more elite institutions. I would recommend these as well. And I think we have some questions.
I'll just read this aloud. There's a question here from Carla. Do certain colleges prefer SAT versus ACT scores and vice versa if one is applying to a STEM path?
Michelle, you want to take that?
The short answer is no. They used to, right? SAT and ACT used to be divided up regionally back when I was taking all these standardized tests, which is ancient history now. But now they're totally interchangeable, SAT, ACT. But Adam, you are the expert when it comes to standardized testing.
Yeah, on the STEM stuff. I haven't really heard any stories about one being more than the other, but there is, like I said, if you don't feel like the math is your strongest suit, a lot of times ACT science can help you boost that. So a lot of times if you have like you come out pretty evenly ACT, SAT on the math versus SAT math, but your science is much better on the ACT. Sometimes that kind of leans you towards taking the ACT because you can at least show off that part of it. And like I said, it's not, you don't really have to know much about science. It's really just about can you read charts and graphs and can you sort of analyze data points and things like that, which is something they build into the SAT as well. But it is a way to it is a way to improve your STEM score over and above what you can do on the SAT sometimes.
I'll just jump in. I wanted to comment on the testing centers and just reiterate what you said. My own experience with my daughter was that test centers booked up many months in advance. And my daughter did one in San Francisco and one in San Rafael. But it is helpful to get on the wait list because people do cancel. And you can get on an electronic wait list and get notified if a seat becomes available.
And just a note, if you have a student who has learning differences and has accommodations at school for testing, say like extended time, time and a half, those do not necessarily transfer to standardized testing to the ACT or the SAT. So if you have a student who has an accommodation, it is good to start early to have your school file and send the proper paperwork to the ACT or the SAT to actually get all those approvals in place so they can test in an appropriate location. And sometimes that takes families a little longer to sort out than they anticipate. So if you find yourself in that position, I would start early and reach out to your high school and get the ball rolling on getting that paperwork filed.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. You need at least you should do it at least 6 weeks in advance. And you need both a medical certificate and approval from your school counselor to do it. So it all takes a while. But once the thing is, once you get it, you have it. So you don't need to keep applying for it.
Mhm.
Where can you,
Question here
yeah.
about, yeah, the test centers. Where can we obtain test center locations and preferred locations?
That's on the ACT or SAT site. They give you, when you go to sign up, they'll tell you what's available to take. Like I said, though, if you don't get a preferred one, if you have to go, it's not as bad as it used to be, but it's still not great. If you can get to, somebody posted the link. If you can, so if you can get to if a lot of times though, if you get on a wait list somewhere, you will get in. You need to, but just look especially on the ACT, it seems more than the SAT. If you have a couple of weeks before, keep looking because a lot of times people are going to cancel and there's going to be openings. And if you can slide in there, a lot of times you can get a better spot later if you just wait. So in other words, so sign up for one, but then wait and see if you can get a better one later.
Well, those are all really great questions. It looks like it's starting to lighten up here. Adam and Michelle, is there anything else you can think of to add to the conversation before we wrap up?
I would just say think about starting the process early. I know I have some seniors and senior families that are approaching me right now, and they're in sort of mild panic. And I would say that's fine, like we can still help you, but it's so much better to start earlier. It makes the process a lot less stressful, and there's a lot that we can do to help support throughout that process. Plus, if you're planning on testing, you do need to plan a bit ahead in order for that to happen.
Yeah, and just in terms of the testing side, I can't stress enough about the performance, the different states in performance, because you really see this. You see students, and it's a shame because sometimes students who really work hard later in the semester and they don't see the results right away, and so that's when they take, say, the June test. And so they sort of tend to give up because they don't feel like the numbers. They get over the summer and they decide, well, like I'm never going to get in here. But then that fall test comes if they don't take it, and it's a real shame because it really is, it's not a content thing as much. There's so much performance, so many factors of performance to go into it as well. So really, if you're not happy with your scores in the spring, always take it in the fall because you will do better. It's amazing to me how much they improve over the summer. It's not like they're all doing reading great books and doing a lot of math over the summer. For some reason, it all just kind of gels. And in the fall, you really see some great numbers very surprising that you might not have seen later in the spring. So
Okay, well, I think that's it. Um, if anyone has a follow-up question later on, you can reach me here at the library and I can share that with Adam and Michelle. Thank you again for coming. That was so informational. I'll tell you, I'm relieved to be done with this. My daughter is about to enter college and I don't have to do this anymore. So you guys, everyone who is looking towards taking in your tests and doing your college admissions preparation, there, you'll get there and you'll be so happy that you've put so much effort into it. It's worth it.
thank you very much, Rebecca.
Okay,
Thank
good night.
you.